So I've been playing through Tyranny, and right now I'm maybe halfway through? I don't know. But there is so much going on in the story, and so many cool ways that it presents itself, that I figured the best way for me to tackle it would be to split it into several videos that focus on certain parts of the game. And so, this first video will be looking at the opening of the game and my first thoughts on the story and how it's presented. And so, we'll start at the beginning with character creation. The creation itself doesn't lend a lot to the story, except for the part where you choose your background. These little snippets tell you a little about the world, right? And your place in it. So you can be like a nomad, you can be a noble, you can be a diplomat, etc. And the key thing is, each of these backgrounds kind of paints a similar picture in different hues, right? Each of them, you're kind of forced into service. I don't think any of them actually look like you willingly joined the armies of Kairos, as it were. All of them basically have you as this victimized, disenfranchised person who is given a choice to either, hey, join our side or have a really, really bad time. And so, of course, you join their side. And that immediately starts to fill in the details of your character, right? Where even if you don't want to be the bad guy, as it were, that's kind of how the chips have fallen, right? You're not in complete control of your destiny. And that is one of the biggest themes of Tyranny, right? The whole point of it is that the world has been taken over by this grand overlord. And as an individual, you don't really have that much control over your own fate. At least, not at the start. And then we proceed into Conquest. Now, I really like Conquest. This is a series of vignettes. A series of small scenes that kind of help to illustrate the world and paint a picture of how things are at this time. One of the coolest things about it is that the use of words is very, very sparing. Like, it doesn't say any more than it needs to. Each scene is very good with economy, which is really, really important. Firstly, because by using a couple of very emotive words, it allows the player to fill in the gaps themselves, right? You and your imagination help to fill in the scenes that are missing, help to fill in the details that would otherwise, well, not be there at all. None of the scenes that are presented give you a full idea of what's going on, but then they ask you to make a decision anyway. Which again feeds well into this idea that the scope of this conflict is way bigger than you can see. All you can see is this tiny part of it, and the decisions you make are going to affect a whole lot more than you can see right now. And that's cool. But furthermore, by being sparing with its language, it doesn't waste your time. And that's really important. This part, the Conquest, happens right out the gate of the game. You start, you make a character, boom, you're into Conquest. And while you can skip it, the key here is not to bore the player. They know they can't throw a novel at you right out the gate. Tyranny and Pillars of Eternity, for that matter, are both games with a lot of words. You're going to be doing a lot of reading going through these games. And Tyranny appreciates that you don't want to be front-loaded with all the words, so to speak, before you've even, started the game. And I, for one, appreciate that. So each passage as presented is brief and it's vivid, right? Some of the verbiage is actually really, really good. One of my favorite lines is, "to sate their lust for iron." Now, in this particular conflict, both sides want these iron deposits to make better armor, better weapons. And firstly, it tells you important things about the setting. That scarcity is a big thing of resources. And furthermore, it's Bronze Age. I can't remember the last game I've played that took place in the Bronze Age, where iron, something that we completely take for granted even in fantasy games, becomes a huge deal. When you go through the game, it's not a case of, oh wow, I've got a +3 sword of might and acid. It's, whoa, I just found an iron sword, and it's made pretty well. This is a huge upgrade over what I have now, right? This kind of super low-tech upgrades really help to sell the setting, where, like, the hand-me-downs of other people, of other factions, of other powers within the world, the stuff that they discard is A, not that good, and B, so much better than what you have. Sure, eventually you get magic gear and funky artifacts, but at the start, that's when they need to sell you on this setting. That's when they need to sell you on this scarcity. As the game goes on, your power grows and you stop feeling the brunt of that. But at the start, they need to make you feel what the world is and your place within it. And at the start, your place within the world is pretty fucking poor. Now, the main thing that these scenes do, besides painting the world for you and letting you know what's going on, is to inform your character. Each choice you make tells you something about who you are. Often, you only have two choices to pick between, each of which are usually pretty bad. One thing about Tyranny is that there are very, very few black and white choices. There are very few cases where it's like, oh, obviously I should side with this person. And to its credit, that makes role-playing much more compelling. In these opening scenes, you're not given enough information to make an informed choice, so you're forced to go with your gut, or to go with the image of the character that's brewing in your mind. Not only do they start to paint the world, these scenes, but they also let you start to paint yourself within that context. One downside that I'll say is that some of these scenes paint you as kind of an unstoppable badass. Like, in one of them you can sneak into the city and assassinate all their leaders, or challenge the queen of this country and slay her in single combat, which makes you seem like you're gonna be all that. And then when you get into the game, yeah, you're a little bit better than the average chump, but you're still gonna get murdered by everyone you see. Your power at the start is kind of laughable, especially if you're playing on the higher difficulties. It's a kind of dissonance because of how the game works. All the actions you take in the game gain you experience, gain you power, etc, etc, etc. And from a meta perspective, if your character had actually done all the things that were described in Conquest, you should be way more powerful than whoever's presented at the start. Like, when the game opened and I started getting into fights, I remember what they had said about me in Conquest, and I looked at what I was doing now, and I thought, did they send the wrong guy? Am I like an imposter? Surely someone better should be in this position doing this work, because this guy here, he never beat no one in no duel. But aside from that, Conquest, I think, is a really cool way to open the game. Partly because there's so much you need to know going in, and this is a really, not only concise way to communicate all that information, well, relatively concise anyway, but it's also interactive. It's not just a series of, like, spreadsheets. No, not spreadsheets, of slideshows. Each of these steps has interaction. Each of the steps, it tells you, is going to change the game, and so you take them seriously. Once you get into the game proper, what really sells the story are the characters. Now, the point of the game is that evil has won. And as a result, pretty much everyone you meet is going to be an asshole. But nobody is a super asshole, right? Tyranny remembers that everyone in its world, no matter how bad they are, is a person first, and a villain second. Even the people who are like the most dangerous and despicable people you will ever meet still have redeeming virtues. And most of them still believe that they're doing the right thing, like they've justified their actions to themselves and to others. No one here is doing anything just for the evils. No one is just kicking puppies for the sake of it. Everyone has reasons for what they're doing. Except for perhaps to play themselves. You can be as evil as you want to be. And on that note, you actually get a tremendous amount of swing, I guess I'd call it, in how evil you can be, in what particular flavor of butt you want to be, right? You can be like a salty butt and just yell at everyone and be super angry. You can be a broody butt and just glare at people all the time. Or you can be a sweet butt and just be nice, friendly, and merciful to the people you meet, which is a great way to get booed and shouted down by literally everyone else in the game.
We shouldn't be socializing with Oathbreakers.
But what's really impressive, and what Tyranny does really well, is the choices that you are given. As I said in the Conquest section, none of the choices that you get have a clear answer. Even when it's just a small dispute between two people, each of them is somehow in the right. Or both of them are super in the wrong, and you just have to choose one of them to favor. And what this does is that it creates a situation where your usual mechanisms for making this choice are taken away from you. Normally, with any kind of dispute, especially in a video game with a karma system, with a good and evil system, you automatically default to the moral choice, right? You see which side is ethically superior, morally superior, and then you say, yep, side with that guy. In Tyranny, you can't do that. In Tyranny, as I said, everyone's an asshole. So you're choosing between butts, right? And what this means is that your choice is not governed by morality, but by who you want your character to be. It actually gives you a chance to roleplay. So often in these kind of games, I'm just like Knights of the Old Republic, for instance. You walk through, and at every point you go like, alright, do I want light side points or dark side points? And your choices, all your choices, are completely informed by that. In this, there's no right choice. There's no good option. You just have to do the best you can in a bad situation. And in this case, doing the best you can means being who you are, being true to yourself. It means role-playing. It means discovering who that character is, buried deep within those stats. And that, I find, is really cool. You're not optimizing. You're not thinking, how can I get the most out of the situation? Mechanically speaking, you're thinking, what would my butt do? And that's probably one of Tyranny's greatest strengths. It actually puts you in a setting, and it turns your character into a person, rather than just a looping record track. The last thing I'll mention is the reputation system, because it is so good. I really like what they've done with it. And to explain why, I'll need to explain what is wrong with other reputation systems. In many RPGs, and other games, pretty much any game that uses the mechanic, say Pillars of Eternity for example, you have reputation with a bunch of factions, and this is a slider, right? You go way to the right and they really like you, you go way to the left and they really dislike you. So what that means is that whenever you're interacting with that faction, you know that you'll either be gaining or losing points with that faction. And this is something that stifles roleplay. This is something that takes agency away from your character and puts it in the mechanics instead. Because in that situation, Every choice you'll make regarding that faction is, do I want these guys to like me? And if so, I will always side with them. It turns the reputation system into something that actually diminishes the immersion of the game. Tyranny doesn't do that, and it doesn't do it in a very, very elegant way. The main problem with the reputation system I described before is that it's on one axis. They either like you, or they don't. In Tyranny, everyone you have a reputation with, whether it be a faction or whether it be a party member, has two axes. The first is how much they favor you or how loyal they are to you. And you get this by generally being nice to them. The other axis is how angry they are at you or how much they fear you. And you get this by being a butt. Now, what's cool about this? What's really, really, really clever about this is that it is extremely rare that you will ever lose points on either of these tracks. Every choice you make, everything you say to these people will gain you points. Right? They'll either make them like you more, or they'll make them more angry at you. So it turns it from a situation where you have just a sliding scale and you want to max out the scale to, yeah, these guys are a bit angry at me, but they mostly like me. And moreover, even if I continue to make them angry at me a couple of times, they're still going to like me. Right? Because my favor is higher than my ref, or whatever. And what this does is create a situation where you're not undoing your own work. If at any point you're caught in a position where you think, oh, my character would say this, but I don't want to displease this faction, or whoever, so I will choose what my character wouldn't say, just so I can get the points, you don't get that problem in Tyranny. Because, or at least not as much, because no matter what you say, you're gaining points. And that's important from a mechanics perspective, because as you gain either favor or wrath with almost anybody, that unlocks abilities. If this faction really likes you, you'll learn new tricks. If they really, really hate your guts, you'll learn new tricks. You're rewarded either way. This means you're not constricted by the system. This means you are free to say on occasion, no, Dishonored, what you did was bullshit, and I'm not going to stand for it. You get to stand up and play your character. Because the game says, I don't care how you interact with these people, as long as you interact with them. Alright? And I'm going to reward you no matter what you do. And this puts freedom in players' hands. It gives them so much more agency in how to play through the game, in how to conduct their character, in how to roleplay, in how to make their choices, make their mark upon this world. There is no optimal approach in dealing with these factions, and so you don't seek one. Right? And what I mean by that is, almost any choice you're given, almost any interaction you have, will gain favor with someone and gain wrath with someone else. Right? So it's very difficult to have someone just purely like you anyway. And because you're rewarded either way, that's not really so much of a pressure for you to do. Right out the gate, even with Conquest mode, it teaches you that your choices will always please someone and displease someone else. It teaches you early that you can't make everyone happy, so don't try. Right? Pick a couple people, side with them if you want, but more importantly, just be true to who your character is. By constantly giving these situations where you can't optimize reputation, you can't make everyone in the world happy, the focus is again put back on your decisions as a player and as a character. Don't try to make everyone happy because you can't. Just play the game. Just play through the story. Enjoy it. This reputation system is a really, really elegant way, in my opinion, of getting the mechanics to step out of the way of the story. Right? Because in the simpler protection systems, they get in the way. They stop you from expressing your character as you want to. Whereas here, you can. You have that freedom. You have that luxury. And that is one of the things that makes Tyranny so cool. So those are my first thoughts on Tyranny and its story. So far, I've really enjoyed my time with it, and I'm certainly going to play through the rest. I'm certain I'll have more to say about it soon, so I'll see you then.